You're listening to Masters Decoded podcast series. I'm your host and the chief decoder, Anis Merchant. Through this podcast, I bring in guests who are successful in a different walk of life to decode and map out their careers and journeys with the hope that we gain all our learnings. The world around us is changing exponentially, and how the impact of artificial intelligence, technology, and other socioeconomic factors have either influenced or enhanced my guests' careers. In today's podcast, I have invited Branka Panic. From a humble beginning to set up the think tank working at the intersection of artificial intelligence, peace, human security, democracy, human rights, and humanitarian action. Branka is a political scientist, expert in international security, international development policy, and peace building. With years of experience working on issues of fragility, conflict, and violence at the humanitarian-peace-development nexus. She is the founder of the Center for Exponential Technologies and founding member of Sustainable Healthy Habitats and Healthy Humans for Peace. Besides her work, Branka consults and provides strategic support to international organizations, governments, and civil society organizations on the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual reality, and related technologies, in which she emphasizes diversity, ethical implications, and human security and accountability to affected populations. Her work has been covered in major publications, and it is my honor to have her on the show. Hi, Branka. Welcome to Masters Decoded podcast series. Thank you for taking time out.
Hi, of course. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cool. And the company which you run is such a big interest area for me as well. But today, when you think about peace and you think about AI, they don't get spoken in the same breath or in the same sentence. So why this idea, what happened, and what got you to start this company?
Yeah, thanks for this question, Anissa. I think it's a really good one, and people usually ask this: how can we actually connect the two? And for me and for people who started AI for Peace, it was actually a natural thing. For us, it was a must, almost a moral obligation for people to think about peace and peaceful societies when they think about AI. When we started talking about this topic, you and I, we were talking also about AI as a technology and peace as a survival. And that was a really trigger for me, a really interesting thing, because for me, peace is not only about surviving, peace is actually about thriving as well. And for most of the people, their first association of peace is usually war or absence of war. And AI for Peace works not only to stop wars and conflicts and violence, which is extremely important, but we work on sustaining peace, on recognizing those underlying conditions that make a society peaceful. And this is this concept that I would like your audience and listeners to hear about. This is what we call a positive peace. So attitudes, institutions, structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. So how do we then tie this notion of peace with technology? And I think we can agree that peace and technology always had a complicated relationship. It was not always an easy, not always a positive one. And when we look today, so your listeners are in AI field or in general exponential technologies, so a lot of technologies that come into this umbrella of AI, I think that this relationship becomes even more complicated. And this is something that we try to explain to people and to show what is this connection. And we see that AI is accelerating rapidly and shaping all spheres of our lives. And at the same time, this power of AI makes it possible to tackle so many big challenges in our lives. And we see that peace is one of these challenges. So we want to use AI proactively. We want to use this positive force to see how we can make our societies more peaceful. And what we saw in the previous couple of decades is that technology, and especially now AI, is mostly used in warfare. This is what we hear. Those are those buzzwords, right? The autonomous weapons or killer robots or drones. And we believe that this is, again, very important for us to serve as a sort of guardians of peace in relation to these technologies as well. But we should also take advantage in researching how these technologies can be used also to prevent and mitigate and resolve conflicts. And this is something that AI for Peace is trying to bring to the table.
But how did this idea come about to leverage AI for peace? What got you to initiate this company, and was there something in the back which was brewing, which got you to think about AI for peace?
Yeah, I think many things, to be honest, and I truly believe that each one of us and the work that we are doing is very shaped by our backgrounds, personal backgrounds as well, even spaces, you know, where we are working and people that we are working with. So I think this definitely shaped my decision to work in this area. First of all, from the perspective of peace as such. So I was born and lived most of my life in the region called Balkans.
Okay.
And maybe for the listeners who are not familiar with this region, so Balkans is based in Southeast Europe. And we had a very complicated past throughout the history, not only recent one, but the far one as well. And we are known to many people as powder keg or powder keg of Europe. So I think this can explain a lot how explosive the region is. And because of, it's a difficult region to live in, I think, and this heritage that I'm probably bringing with me shaped this idea of working for peace. And almost any family from my region, I think, if they look in their past 19th and 20th century, or maybe even earlier than that, they can realize that there was barely a single generation that didn't go through war or that was not affected by conflict. So this is this heavy heritage that I'm talking about, and I grew up through one of these periods as well myself, and I simply spontaneously, I think, decided to dedicate my work in this direction to make sure that we keep our societies safe and peaceful. And then seeing on the other side how technologies are in general impacting, as I said, our lives. And what is this potential to impact peace? I decided to merge the two. And I think this was just the beginning of AI for Peace. Only when I actually started working in data science and when I moved to US and joined the data team through my work in DC, I realized that there is a gap in this field. There are a lot of organizations who are picking up now, not only on the business side, but in general, trying to see how AI can be used for good. But not many of them trying to see how AI can be used for peace, and just recognizing this gap and the need of the needs to have a platform where we can gather as a community and discuss these issues. This motivated establishing of AI for Peace as a hub and community of practice of people who want to make sure that AI contributes to more peaceful worlds.
No, it's motivating, and candidly, it is heartening to hear, even in that conflicts era and what you have seen, you did also educate yourself to be not burdened with what's your surrounding or what the socio-political environment was, but also to teach yourself what's right and wrong. And that led you to US, where you did your master's with Duke University. So how did that transition happen? How how were you keeping up with your studies during the childhood because of the conflicts which were going around? How was the family support enabling all of that, which was during that era?
Yeah, well, it was, you can imagine, like going through any war. It was a complicated time. At that time, we didn't go to school, so we didn't have internet connection or even TV. This COVID-19 reminds me a lot about the period that we went through when
Yep.
the war was happening in my region. And life somehow stops, but you also learn to appreciate life much more. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is this memory that I'm having from this time. And then, as I said, this shaped my wish as well to work in this area. So early on, while I was still studying, while I was still at high school, actually, I started as an activist. So I joined
Okay.
the resistance movement to oppose the authoritarian regime of that time.
Wow.
And then I decided to study political sciences. So my bachelor's was in international relations and my first master's in international security. And when I started working with refugees who were coming from Middle East and North Africa, so unfortunately new conflicts continued happening in other parts of the world. But I think Anis, this was the first time when we actually started combining technology with thinking about conflict, or in this case, it was assisting refugees and helping them on this path and reintegration. So this is this time was, I think, this changing moment for me when I realized that not many things were happening in this area, especially in exponential technologies in Europe. And then I decided to make this strange decision as a mid-career professional to leave my country and go to US. Because I got a chance to do this machine learning related work there. So I was awarded as a Rotary International Peace Fellow. And this is how I arrived at Duke University and did a 2-year research on combining artificial intelligence with peace building.
Wow.
And this is how the story evolved.
Wow. So let's talk about a little bit about the way you were supporting and you were being helping I would say the refugees around that. And mentally you have to be much more stronger, right? Because each refugee comes through a very different need and a background. How has that shaped your thinking today when you look at peace and when you look at AI and when you think about those refugees, how it could help them? Because I look at those 3 focus areas on your website, it kind of sums up what you're thinking about and what your focus is. So somewhere all this ties up.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question, because not many people actually think about this. And I think this is a crucial question for developing artificial intelligence technologies or any technologies that impact vulnerable populations. And for me, this was this part of an experience, maybe not going directly through this myself, but actually working with people who are going through this, to realize how important it is to have their voices included as well. And at that time, I was working in humanitarian relief. So I worked with a refugee center, and people were coming from different conflict-affected areas, having barely anything with them, mostly a backpack, because they were walking, or this was a very difficult path for them to go through. But most of them always had a cell phone. So this was an interesting moment when we realized that this became a very essential technology for them, almost a survival technology. This is this tool that was helping them to find a way on their way to Europe, or to stay in contact with their families, to get information. And then we also started thinking about this. Okay, if this is such an essential thing for them, how we can proactively use that tool to help them on this path. And there is this amazing organization called TechFugees, and they started their initiatives throughout the world. They work with refugees in different refugee centers, and this is exactly what they are doing, connecting technologies with the needs of refugees. So they started organizing hackathons throughout the world.
Wow.
And this is how I jumped into one of the hackathons.
Nice.
We had 48 hours of very intense work of thinking about solutions for refugees. But so hackathons are not anything innovative anymore, but for them, the innovative part was that they were not only including people from tech side and people on the humanitarian relief side, they actually included refugees themselves. So that was really an impressive experience, sharing a space with them, talking with them, hearing from their direct experience. You know, we were not pushing solutions bottom up. We actually talked with them. So you had this feeling of grassroots approach and real human-centered, what we call today human-centered AI. This is what we experienced at that time, and that was almost 5 years, I think, or 4 years ago. So these were those beginnings, you know, little bits and pieces that gave me an idea what can be done. And today we are thinking even a step further with big data and all of the amount of information that we are gathering from different resources. And we are thinking proactively, how can we use this to help different vulnerable populations, but at the same time be very conscious that the utilization of these technologies can create unintended consequences as well. And this is this part of insight that I got, I think, when I moved to US and actually joined the data team. I was working at the World Bank in DC with a unit called Fragility, Conflict and Violence. And just seeing that although you don't need malicious use of a technology. I mean, it's really important to concentrate on this, but even when we have good intentions, when we really want to create a positive impact, we can again create unintended negative consequences. And this was, I think, a huge insight for AI for Peace, and one of the reasons why we created this platform to talk with people, to keep these conversations active, and to make sure that anybody who works on AI thinks about unintended consequences, or what we today call AI ethics, and different elements of AI ethics.
Yeah, and the ethics question comes in because of the data itself has malicious data in it, or it has been looked from that perspective. And the topic you're talking about is peace and conflict regions or conflict areas. Finding data during that scenario is difficult, because in many scenarios data don't exist because of the social or political environment. People would be saying there is no data. And you know, a lot of movies, a lot of articles talk a lot about that. We don't have data. We don't know how many people are affected by so and so. Like I don't want to bring that up, but the recent blast which happened in one of the Middle Eastern region, nobody knew how many people got impacted, how many people died. And it was unfortunate because there was lack of data, or the data was there, but it was hidden somewhere. So, you know, you did a hackathon as well, and you were saying you all were talking to a lot of these refugees. How did you tackle that problem? And when you today tackle the problem of AI for peace, how do you tackle the data problem? Because in corporate world also people say, oh, this is not an AI use case because there's no data. So how did you go about solving that?
Yeah, I think there are two very important elements of your question. And before I tackle the last one, let me go back quickly to what you said at the beginning, that when we talk about ethics, we think about data ethics, and what we usually call is bias. So it's not only that we don't have data, but even when we have, there are things about biased data and embedded discrimination or biases that are already out there that we are in a way emphasizing through the utilization of algorithms or trying to solve different problems with algorithms. And I think this is only partially true. It's very important to think about this and to tackle the bias in data, but it's very important to think about the application phase of a certain solution and a technology as well. And this is what we often see in a humanitarian field or peace building field, that even if we had the perfect non-biased data sets, even if we didn't have black holes, even if we had everything on the paper, we still need to be very careful how certain solutions and algorithms are being utilized in practice. And let me maybe just explain this to audience a bit from my own work. So I joined the team, the data team that was developing algorithms for predicting the probability of famine happening in conflict areas. So I was brought to the team as a social scientist to validate if the algorithm is at all a good solution for a problem like this. And this is why I'm saying, even if we had all of the data related to this problem, and we didn't, we would still have a huge ethical problem, because what we realized is that modern famines are not natural disasters. So they are man-made, and they are used as a tool. Starvation is used as a tool of war. So when we develop an algorithm and put it out there as a public good to international organizations to use to tackle famine, or to know well in advance when certain population will be in hunger, we are also giving these algorithms to potentially malicious actors. And we are going back to this complicated context of wars and conflict. And often governments are even those malicious actors. So there is this element of, additional ethical layer of consideration when we are developing or when we are thinking that we are solving challenges with algorithms or AI. So this is one thing, just to try to explain to your audience how complicated it is to work on AI, but how even additionally complicated it is when you're working with vulnerable populations and trying to solve issues that they are struggling with, and when you are approaching problems with AI. And to go back quickly to a thing that you mentioned, absolutely lack of data. And this is very important to recognize and to be honest and transparent about this. And I think this is something that we see as a wave of activism as well, that people who are working on AI are becoming more and more aware and transparent about this. The other way is, or the other important element for tackling this problem is, again, the access to different technologies and even to the internet as such. And I can give another example of conflict in Syria and how actually, because of this lack of data that you were mentioning, citizens themselves started playing this role of citizens witnesses, like digital witnesses, and they themselves started posting either videos or information or tweets or in any model. It doesn't even have to be a social media, even traditional media. In some countries, it's even radio. So what is being published on radio can be used at that data point. So data points are not only numbers anymore. With natural language processing now, we have this ability to use everything that is textual or even voice, and to use it as that missing data point. And what Syrian activists and citizens allowed and enabled us to do is actually gather this amazing amount of evidence of crimes that were happening in Syria, and this is becoming an extremely helpful tool for human rights lawyers or human rights protectors and organizations who are working in this field to cover those gaps and to use the information that citizens themselves can provide.
Wow. The topic which you're focused on, AI for peace, is also a tough one where you would be getting a lot of pushback, I'm sure, because one is peace and one is AI. So have you had any pushbacks, or have you had people coming to you, you shouldn't be doing this, in a polite way? I would say, I'm sure there can be harsher ways.
Yeah, sure. I think you pointed this in a right way. I think both of the topics are very complicated, to say at least. And what we experienced from the peace side is that, so we try to work globally. Although we started from California and registered the organization, there we really try to go as much as we can globally to cover different parts of the world. Our advisors are from Colombia, Ethiopia, Kyrgyzstan. And then when we look into these specific regional approaches, we see that different regions also have different issues with peace. They even perceive peace, content of the word, in a different way, or some of them even have a saturation of work on peace. So this is one challenge that we are struggling with. And the other one is actually AI, because AI is, and I'm sure that you probably encounter this as well, that very often people can be biased towards AI and technologies, and they can generalize very quickly. They just pick one news, the malicious use of facial recognition or a surveillance technology, which is absolutely an important topic, but they immediately generalize this negative emotion across the spectrum. And I think that AI is such a complicated set of technologies, and then each one of them can be used in different ways, that I don't think any generalization will bring anything good. So this is one of the challenges. And then when we started, we actually thought that it will be complicated to convince peace builders in a way, or to help them understand AI and these complicated terms. And this is how we started. We published our first publication was this non-technical guide about AI, to translate those complicated concepts and to explain to people what the potential of the technology is. And what was a surprise for us is this other side, that we didn't realize that we will have to explain to AI people what peace actually is. And this was this was this interesting insight, that often we see the organizations that are actually working what we call peace building field, but they don't define themselves in that way. They simply don't recognize this, or this is not the way how they would pitch, their startup or a business, because this is not something that this business world is used to. So this is an interesting insight, and this is what we are trying to do now, to not only explain to both groups what the terms are, but also build bridges between the two, and to make maybe communication between them easier, because we really believe that absolutely everybody, not only peace builders, but everybody needs to know what AI is and what kind of impact algorithms have on our lives. But also we believe that AI experts, computer scientists, ML engineer, everybody in this field need to be peace builders in a way, at least a little bit. You know, they need to be aware how their work is impacting everyday lives of people and how they're impacting peace as well.
Okay. And you've been saying we. This is an almost humanitarian initiative which you're driving. Who's we all about? How big is your team? How did you get the team aligned to this AI for peace?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because we really I think started out of our previous work. So founders and the people who gathered around this advisory board of AI for Peace, most of us were previously working either in the humanitarian field or the development or peace building. And of course, we, in the meantime, had people from AI side as well joining.
Okay.
But what we realized is that it's crucial to open this network as much as possible. We realize that often these kind of organizations function as little closed circles, and then it's really hard to get into that circle and be part of conversation. So we want to go in a completely different direction. We want to open up, and we want to be inclusive, and this is why I'm saying we are more functioning as a sort of a network where we want to gather experts, community of practice. When we say experts, we don't mean only AI experts, but also anybody who is bringing this field expertise, and ultimately the common citizens as well. And this is why we are trying to, some of our work is really dedicated to talking and speaking with common citizens. So we are publishing this newsletter where we are trying to keep people informed what is happening in this field. And I think what is maybe a bit different, Anis, when I'm thinking about how we started, most of the organizations that are working on researching the social consequences of AI, and this is what we are doing, most of them are started by people who were either working in big tech companies or AI related businesses, or are still working there. Or the organizations like this are established in the framework of a university. So it's a sort of a think tank. In US scene, these kind of organizations are either established in Stanford or Harvard or MIT, and I'm sure in India is similar as well. We see that throughout the world this is the case. And in that sense, we are different. So we are absolutely a grassroots type of platform initiated and started by a bunch of enthusiasts who are dedicated to keeping the peace in the world, that positive peace that I mentioned at the beginning. And just because I think we are starting from this position, we really want to include as many people as possible in this process.
Yeah, peace has become a big topic today around the world because this pandemic has really emotionally challenged many of us. I would say that's what has really brought the pandemic has brought to the forefront is peace and the definition of peace. And I'm sure you would be approached, and the organization would be approached to talk about the applications. It's not just the famine, but to also see where peace can be disrupted because of the situations which are happening across the world. So how are you today? Because it is very busy period for somebody like you in the space right now. How are you keeping up? How's things happening during this pandemic for you?
Well, maybe I can give an example. with the beginning of pandemic, as for many organizations, I think the plans changed, and the strategy and everything we have just to
Talk about it.
improvise and think about it. Absolutely. And this was in a way a good thing, because this is exactly what brought us to thinking in a way how you mentioned it, Anis, now thinking about COVID as well, and how COVID is impacting our lives, and how COVID is impacting peace as well, or in general vulnerable populations. So although we started our work as a think tank planning to do a research with COVID, we quickly jumped into data-related work. And that was really this positive aspect of being able to work remotely with people throughout the world, just organizing the work through Zoom or Slack. And the first activity that we did was actually an AI challenge. We partnered with an organization called Omdena, and they are functioning as a platform of AI and data scientists who are putting their skills to tackle some problems related to big world challenges. And because they were mostly connecting data scientists, they realized that with a pandemic, we need to make a connection with people who are working in the field as well. And this is this added value that AI for peace is bringing to the table. So in our membership, we have people who worked on previous Ebola pandemic in West Africa, experts in World Health Organization, in United Nations, and so on. So we did this real life program of what I mentioned previously, of building a bridge between the two groups. And we organized a 10-week challenge of utilizing the available data and trying to see what are those consequences that pandemic policies are creating to the world's most vulnerable populations. And this was really a good exercise, and the project spontaneously happened, and it was not easy at the beginning. For the first 2 to 3 weeks, we were just trying to define what vulnerability means. For different groups, it meant different thing. And then we actually realized how difficult it is sometimes to define a problem when you think from a data perspective, when you need a formula to express a certain problem. And from a field perspective or vulnerable groups perspective, where this vulnerability can't be translated into formula that easily. And it can't be translated easily, especially when you look, again, from different countries and different regions, because we see how different regions are differently going through this crisis. So this was a really good experiment, and I think this is exactly how any AI project should be done currently and in the future, just including a diversity of voices, diversity of perspectives. This group had more than 30% of women, and diversity. We had more than 40 countries throughout or representatives from those countries throughout the world, and just hearing all of these voices and having them include was crucial for the project itself. So this is a sort of a pattern and a lesson that we would like to keep utilizing and sharing with other organizations as well who are working in this field.
Looking back at your career and your life also, you're still young, but I'm just saying you've seen a lot. And in the name of the peace, you've seen the world in a very different lens than common human being would see it. And you've impacted in many ways, also using the knowledge and the experience and your own personal experience. Have there been moments which really says, I need to keep going because what I'm doing is good and I'm making a change?
Well, you mean the moment like a specific event in a life?
Yeah, any work which you did, which when you look back and you say, yes, that is an impact I created, or my
Mm.
team.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, absolutely. I think first I thought you were asking about the motivation for work, and I think whenever I turn the news on, I just see how many problems we have, and how this keeps me motivated. There are so many things to be done, but absolutely, that's a good question. You need to see some impact and results as well to keep going. And I think for AI for Peace, we are still very young organization. We just piloted in January, so I'm still hoping for impact to come. For now, I think the feedback of people and actually their interest and their motivation to join this community, and recognizing that we actually need to think more about AI in peaceful terms, not only in general ethical terms, is a sort of a recognition that this is important. And then in my previous work, I think in humanitarian work, there are a lot of examples on everyday basis. Even a simple contact with a person is so rewarding. Just spending, a couple of moments and talking and sharing experiences is just such a motivation to keep going. I had a very important experience, I think, when I moved to US for the first time in my life. I experienced hurricanes, and I came from war-affected region, right? So I know how that looks like. I've never experienced a weather disaster in such a way, and I went to Puerto Rico. That was a Hurricane Maria that completely almost destroyed half of the island. So I went there to join humanitarian relief, and we were just trying to help local communities and to rebuild some of the destroyed villages. And that was such a huge shock for me to see how actually even a natural disaster can destroy in the same way how war can destroy. And I think that was an important lesson, just to realize how, and this is why I'm talking about this positive piece. It's not only about violence and conflict and war. There are so many other challenges out there that we need to face and to solve to have this positive piece. So this is one of these insights that was really a sort of a life-changing moment.
Very interesting. Today you spoke about there is a community being formed, there is a network being formed around AI for Peace. So for my listeners' benefit, if they want to be part of this, how do they do that?
Oh, absolutely. If they're interested specifically in AI and peace, they can always reach out to us or to me personally. They can find me on LinkedIn. We have a website as well. They can contact us there. There are many ways how they can get engaged depending on their interest as well. So we always do a sort of a tailor-made and tailor-prepared cooperation. We do a lot of mentoring as well. That's a very important component for us. And in general, if people are interested in this area, and I will speak maybe more to this women's side of your audience, because I still think there is a lot of work that we need to do on that gender equality and gender gap in tech. And especially AI, so I would definitely advise them to join Women in AI. There are different chapters, different groups, almost in every country now. So it's not a limiting factor if you're not in US, where we usually think the majority of things are happening. This is what brought me to Silicon Valley, and then I realized that no, that doesn't need to be like this. There are so many groups really throughout the world. There is a group, for your listeners who are more interested in AI ethics, I would definitely advise Women in AI Ethics group that is trying not only to bring visibility to the ethical elements of AI, but bring visibility to diversity as well, and how important the diversity in AI is. Yes, absolutely. So there are many, many ways how they can get engaged.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'm sure people will be reaching out to you to get to know more about this. And talking about women in AI and the technology, it's a very, today it has opened up eyes for many, I would say, where it starts not just when you're in the corporate, but it starts at the grassroots level. And when I talk about grassroots level, it starts from early education. How do you do not deter or force a specific gender, I would say men and women both, to think about careers in a certain way or think about education in a certain way? Now, through this AI for Peace, and you did speak about bringing in that aspect, how are you promoting that aspect also? Because that's a topic which is near and dear to you too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. And I think we are recognizing this more and more, how education is important. And I just wouldn't like people, especially younger audience, if there is a younger audience of this podcast, to think that it is too late, if their society or their community maybe nudge them and push them in a certain direction.
Yes, it happens all over the world.
It happens all over the world, and I still think that education is a sort of a lifelong effort and goal, and I see the importance of really supporting tech education for younger people as well. But I also believe that there is a way for in later stage of life to be included in this topic in many different ways. And in terms of education itself, I think there are organizations that are really trying to, again, in a similar way, how women in AI ethics are shedding a light to ethical elements of this topic. There are organizations who are helping especially disadvantaged groups in early stage primary education or secondary education to get an access that they usually wouldn't get. And I think that's extremely important, especially seeing how different universities can be expensive, or how education in this field can be expensive. There is a way to enter this field without being disadvantaged, because of lack of money or resources. And there are numerous platforms out there, and if anybody is interested, just reach out to me. Platforms that are working on this volunteering base of engagement, where people will share their skills and learn others, even people who are coming from MIT or Stanford. So your opportunities will not be limited if you are not present there. And then maybe, Anis, just to emphasize the importance of this topic, how we are talking, I think, for decades about this issue of gender gap, and we've started by talking in tech. Now we are talking about AI. And unfortunately, when we look into numbers, we still see how the situation is very, very bad. I got, just to illustrate this, I got some numbers so people can see how difficult the situation is, and I can just read quickly some of them. That women currently make up to 24% of the computer science workforce, only 24%. And what is even more important maybe is seeing this difference in salaries between men and women. So median salaries are only 66% of the salaries of the male counterparts. So those are discussions that we need to have as well. Why is this the case? If for the same work there is such a big pay gap? And then another thing that actually women from this network, Women of AI, that I became part of, they shed a light to this. I was not even aware of this, that it's not even a problem of academia or entering to the working force of tech. The problem is actually keeping women there, because the work is shaped in such a way that it keeps men not thinking about this different experience that men and women are having through this work. So this is an important element that we need to think about as well. And then, I mean, it's enough just to look at numbers of different big tech companies that should probably give a sort of a role model to others, but are not doing that. The numbers are really terrible. Even in Google or Facebook, we see that women are less than 20% of the technical roles. And then for women of color, the situation is even worse. So we definitely need to talk more about this, but we need to find a way to call these organizations accountable and to bring, these conversations to practice and to see how we can finally do something about this gap.
No, it's a very, I would say it is a very crucial topic. And we have seen diversity brings in a lot of variety, and I've experienced it myself, and I've always had that healthy balance. Even in our organization today, we have about 60-40%. It goes up and down by 2 or 3% here and there, but it's been there. But it's been an effort to ensure that, you just don't force people in, but you also get the right people in for the right roles, but also at the same time, you bring in the diversity as much as possible so that, there's different perspectives, which often you miss if you are aligned to one, whether it is caste, color, gender, any of those aspects.
Absolutely.
It's not just about gender, it's about variety of diversity, which you should have within your team, which is crucial.
Absolutely.
So I know we are on top of an hour, Branka, and I know you are super busy.
Time is flying.
Time is flying. We don't know, we are still in October, and I don't know how this entire year has passed by, but you've seen a lot in life. And I'm sure there are a lot of such people out there also who may choose different paths, but you've taken life in a very positive way, and you're doing things which have and ensure that what has impacted you doesn't impact many others. What will be your parting thoughts or advice be to somebody either going through the situation which you've been through or thinking about doing what you're doing? What will be your thought to them?
I will definitely advise to anybody to follow their passion. I know it sounds maybe funny, but I really think this is crucial. Just listening your heart and following what is close to your heart and doing this work, and not giving up when it's tough. It will be tough throughout the life in many ways, and we see this through COVID as well. And I think that every time when something doesn't happen, or if we miss an opportunity, that's only a way for another opportunity to appear, and it's something better to happen. And just keeping this approach, don't being afraid, to start again and sometimes to fail, but don't give up. I think this is something that I would advise to everybody.
On that note, Branka, it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I got myself educated about AI and peace and how they both can go together. So thank you for your time, your precious time. I really appreciated the conversation we had today.
Thank you so much, Anis. It was such a pleasure to be here and talk, and I hope we will continue this conversation someday soon.
Definitely. And you have a good day and stay safe and be peaceful, I would say.
Thank you, Anis.
Thank you for listening in. And we close yet another episode of Masters Decoded. If you've enjoyed the episode, please, you can help us out by sharing it on social media. I would personally appreciate that. It's how we can reach more listeners And the more listeners we have, the more awesome guests I can get in touch and convince to participate in these conversations that are a joy to have for me, and I hope they are a joy for you to listen as well. You can also help a lot leaving reviews on iTunes or your podcast service of choice. Reviews are surprisingly helpful in supporting the podcast to get to more listeners. If this episode has intrigued you, I would request you to subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date and get notified to the future episodes. With that, I bid you and see you in the next episode.